Ready, set, let's go. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up. I'm on the way up, going all the way up.
The NFL is getting ready to start its 104th season. The preseason is over and the final roster cuts have been made. And this season, the saga of the African American quarterback has continued to move ever forward. This season, the NFL has again had the most African American starting quarterbacks in league history. A record 15 quarterbacks of African American descent were named as the starter for their teams. That is one more than last year and 4 more from the year before. This is a far cry from 1968 when Marlon Briscoe became the first African American to start a game at quarterback when he started for the Denver Broncos in their 4th game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Unfortunately, Briscoe was cut the next season, but James Harris became the first opening day starter when he won the job as a quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. It would take until 1987 before more than one African American would be the opening day starter. That year, Warren Moon, who was a free agent signee by the Houston Oilers, and Randall Cunningham, who was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, were both named starters. Doug Williams became the first African American quarterback drafted in the first round in 1978 by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and then he became the first African American quarterback to win the Super Bowl when he led the Washington Redskins over the Broncos in Super Bowl 22 a decade later. Michael Vick was the first African American quarterback drafted first overall in 2001. Steve McNair became the first African American quarterback to be named NFL MVP when he won in 2003 playing for the Tennessee Titans. In 2017, the New York Giants were the last team to have an African American start at quarterback when Geno Smith was tabbed to start over Eli Manning in a losing season for the Giants. When the NFL was originally founded in 1920, Fritz Pollard was the first African American player and quarterback. Back then, the quarterback was more of a blocker and runner than a passer, and the game has changed a lot since then. Pollard played until 1926, and when he left, there was not another African American quarterback until 1953. That year, Willie Thrower played in 2 games for the Chicago Bears. Once again, there was a large gap before African American quarterbacks would get a chance. Next came Briscoe in 1968. The next season, he was faced with the choice to change position or get cut from the team. Briscoe was released because he really wanted to play quarterback. He later signed with the Buffalo Bills, and his desire to play football was so strong that he moved to receiver. Later on, he won 2 Super Bowls playing receiver as a member of the Miami Dolphins. Briscoe faced one of the biggest things African American quarterbacks dealt with in those days. They would come out of college, and if they wanted a chance to play, they would have to change positions. Over the next 15 years, there was a smattering of African American quarterbacks that would get a chance to start. Many would only get a few starts here and there and try to make the most out of the opportunities that came their way.
I've been a quarterback ever since Pop Warner League and all the way up through flag football and junior high school, and also in college. And it's a position I always coveted. I like the position because watching Johnny Unitas and Bart Starr on TV, and they gave the orders, so I wanted to be a shot caller, and that's what I wanted to do. And of course, that was unheard of back in the 50s and the 60s, the era in which I grew up.
Then came Williams. After being drafted, Williams led the Buccaneers to the playoffs 3 times in 5 years and all the way to the NFC Championship game in 1979. During that time, Williams faced the Chicago Bears, and they had Vince Evans at quarterback in the first game featuring 2 African American starting quarterbacks. Unfortunately, during that time, Williams was the only main starting African American quarterback, and in 1982, Williams and the Buccaneers got into a contract dispute, and Williams left the team. After 3 years in the USFL, Williams reunited with his former offensive coordinator Joe Gibbs on the Washington Redskins. Gibbs was the head coach and originally signed Williams to be the backup quarterback. In the 1987 season, starter Dre Schrader would get injured, and Williams would be called on. He was named the starter of the playoffs, and the rest, as they say, is history.
The first black quarterback to lead his team to the Super Bowl and win.
Every article that was written was never just Doug Williams, quarterback. It was always Doug Williams, the black quarterback, a Tampa Bay's black quarterback. So that adjective is now it's removed. And these guys not only removing those adjectives, they moving the stigma that a black man cannot lead a team to the Super Bowl.
During this time, Williams was no longer the only black quarterback. Warren Moon had been signed by the Houston Oilers after 5 years and 5 championships in the Canadian Football League. He took the NFL by storm and became the first African-American quarterback to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame in 2006. Moon had come out of the University of Washington in 1978 and, like many before him, was asked to change positions. He knew he was a quarterback and stuck to that. He was not drafted by the NFL and elected to continue his career in Canada. After proving that an African American could play quarterback, the Oilers came calling and signed him to be their starting quarterback. Moon would play 10 years in Houston and set many of the franchise's quarterback records that stood until Steve McNair came along. He made the Pro Bowl 6 times and is considered one of the best quarterbacks during his day. Randall Cunningham entered the NFL in 1985 after a stellar career at UNLV. Cunningham's ability to scramble and make plays with his legs was something that many had never seen before. He led the Eagles for 3 seasons and to the playoffs each season before an injury caused him to lose some of his speed and athleticism. He would play 4 more years in Philadelphia before retiring. After a 1-year hiatus, Cunningham returned to the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings. He was in Minnesota for 3 years, and he had what he said was his best year in 1998 as he led the Vikings to a 15-1 record in the NFC Championship where they would lose in overtime to the Atlanta Falcons. When Cunningham left the Eagles, he was their 3rd leading rusher in Eagles history with 4,482 yards, and 2nd in career passing yards with 22,877 yards. Some consider Williams, Moon, and Cunningham as the catalyst for the change in the belief of the abilities of the African American to play quarterback. Before then, African Americans were not considered smart enough to play such a mentally demanding position, but with what these men showed, that thinking started to change. This led to more African American men getting the chance to play quarterback and showing what they could do. Michael Vick would take that chance and become one of the most exciting players that the NFL has ever seen. After being drafted, his speed and ability to throw deep would amaze fans for 6 years before an unfortunate scandal would sideline him for 2 years. He came back and continued to bring his exciting play style to the NFL for 7 more years. He helped to make it possible for Patrick Mahomes to become a 3-time Super Bowl champion for the Kansas City Chiefs and what some consider to be the best quarterback in the NFL right now. The younger quarterbacks are showing more and more that it's more about the person than the color of their skin.